Hello and welcome to All for Women's Football. We are live once again and we are here to talk all about WSL 1, WSL 2, UWCL, and if Sean's in the chat, we might even mention ACL. We'll see after this. I had a brief moment of panic there where I was worried that a Brighton player might have done their ACL recently, and that was sounding like it was some sort of in bad taste joke. But of course, that is not the case. And of course, Sean is here. We were hoping to get him on this evening, but he stood me up because he had a date with the NHS for the second time. So we are all very, very pleased to announce that he has got himself a knee, but he's obviously missing a bit of hamstring. So if anybody can sort him out on that, that would be fabulous. But well done, Sean. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you next week. Hello to everybody else, Early and Uncle Montana and Daniel. Lovely to see you in the chat. Ladies, how are you?
Good, thank you. Yeah, glad to be back.
Presumably Liberty's okay. Excellent.
I'm good. I'm good. Sorry, I didn't know if Freya was going to say anything else because I didn't know if she was finished, so I was waiting because I didn't want to interrupt. I'm good. Yeah. Erling Hammarby won at the weekend, 3 points. Still top of the table, and we will be, even though we'll talk about Champions League qualifiers, but Häcken got their game for the weekend against Malmo moved because of their qualifier, which I think is woke nonsense, personally. And so that game has been rescheduled for a later date. But still, when that game is played, no matter the outcome, we will still be top of the table. And Smilla Homburg scored a sensational free kick, and she was one of two teenagers to score sensational free kicks for teams I am fond of / support this weekend, because Olivia Moultrie scored a really good free kick for Portland Thorns as well. And there's not right, guys. Hammarby chat. There's going to be no other opportunity for me to talk about them in the rest of this conversation because it's not relevant. So here we go. We won. We're top of the table. Smilla Homburg scored a free kick and another goal, and Vilma Koivisto, unrelated to Emma Koivisto, also scored against her old club because we played Linköping. And now I'm going to refrain from talking about Hammarby for the rest of the show. And if I don't, then I don't know.
Something will be surprised. So it's not a problem whatsoever. But there we go. That's your Scandinavian update, sponsored by Liberty Sirens. So all is well there. I agree with you, Sean. What's best about that is that she managed to get that in with "How are you?" Which I've got to be honest, wasn't a rabbit hole that I thought she'd get through there with. But I blame Erling for that one because he brought it up in the chat and she was like, "Yes, there it is. There's the in. Sorted. Go, go, go." It was like watching the Navy SEALs about to storm a house. That was so well done, Liberty. And great news. It's always good. It's all for women's football, and we don't care where it is. If it's women and it's playing football, then bang it on. Tell us all about it. So excellent stuff. We're going to start, unsurprisingly, with the WSL, purely because it's the biggest league out of the two. So there we go. Going to go with that. And I feel like, as we said backstage, the whole point about this is to kind of just talk if we think the league has begun in the manner that we were expecting. And obviously, we see Manchester United top of the table as it stands with goal difference, Arsenal second, Chelsea third. And of course, right down at the bottom, we have London City Lionesses with 0 points, 9 conceded, and just the 2 goals scored. So it's kind of interesting seeing how the table has sort of shaken up. A lot going on. We'll not begin with Manchester United because we've just spent the last 90 minutes talking about them. But I think we're going to start with the champions, Chelsea, who've had an interesting couple of games. Their first one, obviously, against Manchester City with a nice little 2-1 win there. And then a game against Aston Villa. And I have to be honest, I'm going to start with you, Freya, because I was so happy when I saw Aston Villa equalise. I really did hope
Me too.
that they were going to hold on. But yes, Chelsea. It's sad, really, because as soon as it happened and they equalised, there was a part of me that was hoping that Villa were going to go on and score another goal, because at some point the record has to break. But they just don't know when they're beaten. And Sam Kerr coming on as well to get her first goal since her return. Kind of a little bit of poetry there, I suppose.
It's just a bit boring when Chelsea win all the time, isn't it? No, it's. I think for Villa, they're very much. You can see the potential there, and the potential's been there for a very long time. And I think, annoyingly, if that wasn't against Chelsea, and that defense wasn't so incredibly tight at the back, in the second half, first half was a bit wobbly, hence the goal. But yeah, I think if that was against another team, I think Villa would have won that one. It is annoying how good Chelsea are. They've got Ellie Carpenter. Like, she's just, I mean, she's been incredible for ages, but to finally see her in the WSL doing what she does best was been just incredible to watch. Annoying to watch as a Villa fan. But yeah, I think Villa should have scored more in the first half. Ebony Salmon's a strange one. I don't know if either of you two have got an opinion on her as well, but she's so talented, but her decision making isn't fantastic. So she'll either keep the ball too long and, she wants to get the perfect goal, or she crosses when she should have shot. Like, her final decision making is awful. So yeah, I think they just need that little bit of edge up front, and I think they're so close, they're so nearly there. But yeah, Chelsea are just annoyingly good. So yeah, when it was 1-1, I was like, if we can get a point from this would be incredible. So yeah, that first half should have been done and dusted essentially. But as Chelsea do, they turn it up another 5 notches. Villa's bench is practically non-existent at the minute, as per usual. And we don't have a Sam Kerr to bring on and score a goal. So yeah, it was fair play to Chelsea, but a bit annoying for Villa when their performance, when you look at other games this weekend, probably would have got them points elsewhere. But,
I mean, he's quite a player to be able to bring on, Sam Kerr there, Liberty. But I thought it was actually quite interesting when you see the goal. It's fairly scrappy. It's not necessarily what you'd always see from a Sam Kerr goal. And it seemed to be was that a dab, or did you just sneeze?
Bless you.
I sneezed.
But I think it's just really interesting that obviously she's never going to lose that ability to be in the right place at the right time. That is just an innate thing that she has got as a striker that she's worked on over many years. But do you think people should be getting excited thinking that Sam Kerr is going to come back and be the Sam Kerr of old? Or is this her main sort of position? Are we expecting to see her come off the bench in order to have the opportunity to sort of add a little bite to the front line at the end of games?
I think at least I think she'll be coming off the bench at least until January. Purely because if you're away for 20 months, you are not going to be able to start a game, play 60 minutes for a good long time. I think, they'll get to a point where maybe in November she comes on at halftime, or she starts a game and plays 45 minutes. But when you are away for that long with such a serious injury, and this isn't her first time coming back from an ACL, so she'd had 2 before when she was much younger. I think until January she will be this sort of coming off the bench threat, which is also not at all a bad position for her to be in, because I think if you're coming off the bench and you're playing for a club like Chelsea, there is less pressure on you to score, especially in games where you're playing oppositions outside the top 4. Obviously, if you're playing Arsenal and it's 0-0 and you're coming off the bench and you're expected to score, it's very different than if it's already 2-1 against Villa and you're coming off the bench and there's no real expectation. But I think, majority of the games she's going to be coming off the bench, Chelsea will probably already be leading. So there's less pressure, which I think is really good for a player who's coming back from, once again, such a serious injury. Also think, though, it's interesting that she will, without a doubt, be going to the Asia Cup in February. She's come back, honestly, right at the right time. So I don't think Chelsea should necessarily get too comfortable with being able to sub her on or start her, because no matter what, she will be leaving in February to go to the Asia Cup, as well as Ellie Carpenter and so many other of the Australians in the WSL. So I think she's come back right at the right time, especially because Myra Ramirez probably won't play until January now with her hamstring, and her hamstring injury, apologies, and stuff like that. So I think she's coming back at the right time, but I think she's going to play with not too much pressure on her shoulders to be Sam Kerr and score, absolute worldies and stuff until it's probably after the Asia Cup, especially for Chelsea. I would like to say about Ebony Salmon really quickly. I have this theory that people thought she was going to come to the WSL from the Houston Dash, and she was going to hit the ground running in the same way Rachel Daly did. Obviously, very similar circumstances. Both came back from the Dash to the same club. And I think people expected her to hit the ground running and be, this sort of player that Rachel Daly was. And they're very different players in general. I don't necessarily think she's attuned to the league in the same way that Daly did and has since, purely because Ebony Salmon has less experience than Rachel Daly. She almost only has NWSL experience when she joined the WSL. She didn't have this sort of England experience that Daly did. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all, because I think when you have this sort of player that's coming from such a different league, you add something different to the WSL as a whole. I think that's really interesting. But I think because there was so much of her having such a similar path to Daly, that potentially it's got lost a bit. But I still think she's a really good player. I just don't think it's necessarily what was. I don't know. I think it's just something I think about quite often when I see her, and I'm like, oh, this, that, and the other. And then I'm like, especially when you're talking about her decision making, when she holds on to the ball too long, she doesn't pass across when she should, shoots and stuff. I'm thinking, is she still working in an NWSL state of mind instead of a WSL state of mind? Which, once again, isn't a bad thing. I just think it is a thing, because I sometimes watch her and I go, if you were in America, that would have been a goal, or that would have been an assist, where it's just not the same here. And I have the same fears about somebody like, whilst we're talking about Chelsea, about Alyssa Thompson. This is a player that has some US women's national team experience. I actually watched her debut at Wembley against England, which was fun. It's a nice little callback. But other than that, she doesn't have league experience outside of Angel City, which is such a specific team and a specific way of playing that I wonder how long it's going to take her to settle into Chelsea, because she's so talented, but you have such a specific way of playing that you've always played, that I'm like, does it translate the same way? I'm not sure yet. But also, she's literally just made her debut, so I'm like getting ahead of myself quite massively, because she's played 45 minutes so far.
A very specific sort of climate as well, when you start talking about Angel City compared to the City, I suppose, when it comes to England. So speaking of that City, we know that Chelsea were fourth, Freya, after week one with a win over City. They moved, we say, into the top three now, with the worst goal difference out of the top three. Spurs also level. We'll talk about them in a bit. But Arsenal obviously managed to get themselves a cheeky little win as well. I've been really debating how I should ask this question, but I've just decided I've got to be real and go with it myself. How much did you laugh at the goal? Because I spent on Friday an inordinate amount of time sticking up for Daphne Van Domselaar, saying when it hits the post, there's not a lot you can do about that. If it's hit the post and hit you in the back of the head, there's nothing you can do about it. And then I watched it, and she catches it, and then she doesn't, and it's like she's got it, and then she just it's almost as if she didn't mean to do it, and then it drops, hits the head, hits the post, and pops in. It's not one she's going to want to see again. But what a performance then from Arsenal to cancel out that issue and then go on to win the game.
Yeah, I think whenever a game, so it's like the 5th minute, wasn't it, or something like that. So, I mean, when that's the start of your game, you can either go 2 ways. You can go, oh God, is this what the game's going to be like? And just kind of all woes me and kind of all fall apart. But yeah, luckily Arsenal did what Arsenal have shown they can do and really came back full force and just hit the ground running. But yeah, I mean, Van Domslaar's a strange one. And again, coming from a Villa perspective, she didn't settle at Villa. So we never saw like the confident, incredible Van Domslaar we saw at the Euros, which everyone was impressed by before she came to the WSL. And when that went in, you thought, oh, I hope that doesn't knock her confidence again, because she's got to a stage now with Arsenal where she can be confident and she can be herself and she can, show what talent she is. But yeah, I think when you've got a cross coming at you like that you're kind of not expecting to go in, to then for it to slip through your hands, which is the worst thing to have as a goalkeeper, when you think you've got your hands on it. And then, the ricochet, just, no, it's the worst thing. And you just see her face like, oh God, I've done that. Like that was all on me. So yeah, I mean, you feel sorry for any goalie that kind of goes through that. But yeah, luckily Arsenal, very comfortably won that game. So yeah, a good 3 points for Arsenal, but I don't think it was ever in doubt really. West Ham are still a very strange team, consistency wise. You never know which team are going to turn up. So yeah, it was what I expected really.
No, for sure. Yes, Connie, you did miss it, but it's the beauty of YouTube. We can go back, just push it back a few. It's not long. We're going to be going 17 minutes, so it must have been about 10 minutes ago. But this will be quite a thing. An incoming January Scandi raid, which I've got to be honest, just feels like justice, really, for the number of times that Scandinavia came over and raided us. So, that was back in the day. It feels like a little bit of a change over there. But I'm not going to ask her about that, because currently on the WSL, I am going to talk to her, as we were just talking about there, with how Arsenal have been getting on in the league thus far. And I made a joke of it with the whole Daphne Van Domslaar thing, but sometimes you do just have to laugh, because what else can you do? You can't get angry at her. She's a class goalkeeper, but people make mistakes, and not always at the greatest of times. So for you, again, that's the one big thing that both Chelsea and Arsenal had in common. They both had a little setback in terms of the other side scoring a goal, but absolutely brilliantly done. And again, having pulled themselves into that position, it's 2 wins from 2. And currently there are, 4 teams, but really 3 that have absolutely shown their worth so far in terms of getting those goals.
Yeah, I think on the own goal, I will say this: Dagenham 1 is a terrible place to be. Wouldn't put that on anyone. And I'm from Essex, so yeah, wouldn't force that on anyone. It's so bad that I did not go. Apologies, everyone, but it's a really awful place to get to from where I live. It was raining and it was Dagenham on a Friday night, and I didn't fancy it. Anyways, the own goal it was raining really, really hard. The ball was really slippy, and I think she went to catch it, and it sort of doesn't get there, and she accidentally goes to then move her backhand to then kind of cup it, and then because everything's slippy, pushes it in by accident. The thing is, in that point, Arsenal of pasts would have let that get to them, and they would have lost that game 2-1. The difference is we are no longer Ida Val Arsenal, and we went, it's fine, it happens, we will push on. And I think Arsenal got to this point where they now understand how to change games without having to get to halftime and it being this sort of big team talk and big issue. They obviously get the equaliser through Frida Lynn Hudson Warnham. Very good goal, very good from Beth Mead as well. I think she was really good this game. I think obviously was really, really good coming off the bench against London City to get the 2 assists in about 14 minutes. And then obviously gets the assist for this one. I think her ability to either start or come in as a sub in games and understand how to affect the game and change things is an underrated aspect of her game that not necessarily has got the praise it deserves in the past. I think it was really nice to see that she still got that. The goal, the equaliser is really good, and then it gets to half time and it almost is like Arsenal just keep pushing. They're like, a draw isn't good enough, and I think this is a team that nothing more than 3 points will ever be good enough, especially when you have such a big target on your back as being the European champions, and people are going to want to beat you because you have the biggest title in the land as such. No offense, Chelsea fans. And I think they just hit second gear when Blackstenius come on, as Shane said, really helped turn things around. I think that taking Frida off, putting Russo in as the 10, a lot of people have issue with that. I don't really mind it if she's then getting 2 goals and an assist from the 10. Like, I don't really have an issue with that. Stina's goal was very good. Caitlin Ford's header was really good, and she'd had the chance beforehand. And then she gets her goal on her 100th appearance, which I think is really nice. And then the Russo goal and then the penalty just sort of gets to a point where Russo scores her first of the 2 and you're like, okay, game's done. And then West Ham start to slip up. I think, if it wasn't such a the game hadn't got so far away from West Ham, then that mistake isn't made and she's not brought down in the box and it's not a penalty. If obviously it's a penalty, but I'm saying if the game wasn't already so far away from them, she just doesn't make that mistake. I think it was quite rash and a bit silly. And then, it's 5-1 at that point. And then you go, okay, cool. Arsenal then at that point have, across the 2 games, 3 players on 2 goals, 1 player on 3 assists, a player on a goal and an assist in Olivia Smith. Chloe Kelly has a goal and she didn't even play the West Ham game. And you go, okay, Arsenal are no longer reliant on 1 player to score goals. I think at some points in seasons gone past, there was a lot of pressure on Russo or Blackstenius to be this only goal scorer and to sort of carry the team for goals. And it was almost Arsenal at a point where it's quite similar to Chelsea, where goals can come from anywhere. And whilst I think sometimes that can be to a detriment if you are so sure that everyone else can score that you don't take chances, the fact that basically every winger, every 10 option other than Victoria Pelova, and every striker for Arsenal after 2 games have at least a goal, that it's really good. And Sean, neither have United, and I'm sorry, if you're going to have this question of have Arsenal actually been tested, neither have United. Actually, United had the easier of the 2 options, which I think is very interesting when you think that next weekend it is United versus Arsenal, but United had Leicester opening and then London City, and then we had West Ham and London City. I think it's a valid question, but I think you then have to have the same energy for other teams in the league as well. Because
so that's 11th place West Ham.
Yes.
And 12th place London City Lionesses. Whereas we had 12th place London City Lionesses and 7th place Leicester City.
But Leicester weren't 7th when you played them because it was opening game and you put 4 past them.
No, they couldn't be 7th when they played us because they were
you
too
put
busy
4 past them.
an absolute hiding of 4-0. Of course they weren't going to.
And also,
I do want to.
That was Leicester and Liverpool because I think they had a really nice second game. I'm not going to lie.
We'll get to them. briefly. But it is time to throw United into the discussion, because Freya, well, I did want to ask that, and Sean has obviously stolen my notes and then just decided to try and scupper the show there by dropping an exclusive on what the next question was going to be. But it wasn't necessarily about being tested, but more about the fact that two of the three teams at the top of the table are going to be playing each other at the weekend. United having had to have played a Champions League qualifier a few days before. I just wondered how important you both think that game could be. We know that in the past, you can't afford to drop too many points within the WSL. So I don't really want it to be a conversation of who you think is going to win it, but what the ramifications of either result could be. Because if United win, that's Arsenal 3 points behind already after just 3 games. Equally, if Arsenal were to win it, that's a lot trickier for United. And I think closing the gap for them might be that little bit more difficult. So where do you sort of feel like we stand on that one? Is that an important game? Can it be that important on match week 3? What do you reckon? Because it's kind of what we said. That's two of the teams that could potentially be in the top 3. But a lot of people thought that City would finish above United. And of course, if City can win at the weekend, they'll be on the same number of points as United if they lose.
It's a hard one, because we know this league, we've seen it, you lose 2 games and that's done, your league's done. So I think even though we're saying, yeah, it's only, match day 3, every game's important, and literally every single one. And especially when you're going to come up against particularly United versus Arsenal, it is their first real test. And that's going to show their standard. It's going to show where they actually are compared to, no offense to everyone else, but lesser competition in that sense. So yeah, I think it'll be a good test, and it'll be a good test to see if United can cope with that Champions League load as well. Arsenal have done it, previously for a couple of years now. So they're used to that kind of rotation, the double game weeks, etc. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see Man United, how they continue to do that. And have they got that rotation down to that everyone? What was I saying? How long can I get with baby brain, by the way? Because honestly, my thought process is not going very well. But yes, I hope United are up to that test and show what they're really made of against someone like Arsenal. So yes, important.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm going to let you talk about that if you really want to, Liberty, but I also want to throw Spurs into the conversational route, because they also managed to beat the mighty West Ham, who are, of course, a very difficult side to beat, as you have already alluded to. But they also managed to get a good win against an Everton side that I seem to recall a lot of us purring about prior to the season starting, because of some of the players that they brought in and how well we thought they were going to do. So when you start looking at that, was this the start that you expected from Spurs?
Maybe not, but also I think that's purely because of, in grand scheme of transfer windows, they didn't get much. But at the same time, they got a new manager who was trying to see what he was working with before he added players, because Spurs were really interesting last season, where they had on paper a really decent and good squad. That's the only time I'm ever going to praise Spurs. No, I'm joking. I'm only joking. I will be impartial. But they had a really good and strong squad to be mid-table, even top half of the table. The thing was, something didn't click between the squad and the manager in the same way it had the season before. And that's not diss on Villaham, because I quite like him as a manager. I thought, he did really well at Häcken before he went to Spurs, and in his first season at Spurs, he did, in my eyes, a really decent job. But something then happened last season where it wasn't the same, and they have to get rid of him. Unfortunately, there is no other option at that point. And obviously, a lot of United fans, especially, were interested in Martin Ho and what he had with them before when he was an assistant, and then what he then has when he goes over to Norway and he does really well as the head coach over there. And it was this question of, does it replicate the same? I think in the grand scheme of the WSL, Spurs have had decently simple and easy teams in their first two. That's not a diss to West Ham or Everton, because I think both did really well in the transfer window and look to be in good stead. But when it's the beginning of a new season, you're not going to see the best of a team yet. That's sort of the reality. And I think it took them to get past West Ham for a penalty in the 80 something minute. It was not exactly like they ran away with the game. And even at Everton, they get 2 goals, and one of them is already a contender for goal of the season. Obviously, I'm incredibly fond of Katinka Thunberg. I've seen what she could do in the last year at Hammarby, and the second Hammarby mention, the incredible things that she had managed to give the club, getting them Champions League football in the qualifier against Benfica, single-handedly stopping Rosengard's undefeated season with her hat-trick against them. The week after they had been crowned champions, it was mathematically impossible for anyone else to win. And then she was like, well, I'll just get a hat-trick and ruin your invincible season. Her Champions League goals against St. Polten and things like this. So I already knew she was going to be a really good player. My point of interest was how she's going to fit in a Spurs side that your starting striker for Spurs was the captain. It is Beth England. It's never not going to be unless she's injured, because she's the captain. She brings so much experience to Spurs and has been a really big player for them in big moments since she joined them from Chelsea. And then you have Martha Thomas, who also has a good amount of experience, both in the WSL in different teams and also for Scotland. And so I thought it was going to be really interesting to see where these 2 more experienced players lined up with essentially a kid. She's 21. She has some very limited experience for the Norwegian senior national team, and mainly Damallsvenskan experience, despite it being a higher level to what Spurs are playing at, because it was Champions League, if you understand me. And I thought it was really interesting that essentially she starts this Everton game as the starting striker, and Beth England, as Shane's pointed out, is starting in the 10. I thought that was really interesting because it's essentially a copy and paste of how Hammarby played her when they wanted to play both Katinka and Ellen Vangerheim at the same time. They'd put Katinka in at the 9 and then play Ellen, who's also a striker, in at the 10. And I think, that in its own right is really going to help her, because she's already got that experience of being the striker in front of another striker in the 10, as such, if you get my brainwave. And also, even though the goal doesn't come from that sort of formation, it just comes because she sees just the opportunity of a lifetime and goes for it. But I think that's where she gets her first start, and she obviously comes off the bench in the West Ham game for Dennis. Yeah, and then she replaces her in the starting 11 yesterday. I think Spurs, once again, are going to be a team in this conversation of Arsenal and United haven't been tested. Neither really have Spurs, because they've had decent teams that are in a very similar level to them, but no one really above them who's going to push them really hard in the same way United and Arsenal haven't really been pushed. And yeah, maybe we can say the same about Chelsea, but I think Chelsea are getting to a point where they create their own problems and it's not as smooth sailing. So I think maybe it changes when Spurs are facing a top 4 side. But until that point, I think they're done good. I can't fault them for that. The only team to keep 2 clean sheets, haven't conceded a goal. Also haven't faced a shot on target or something along those lines across the 2 games, which I think also is very impressive and shows that they've definitely solidified the back line, which I think at some points, especially last season, had caused them issues. So, props to them for doing that, because that's a part of a scouting team, seeing where the issues lie in a squad and going, okay, let's fill that with this, that, and the other. So, yeah, I think there are going to be harder challenges, but at the moment, like, well done to them. Obviously, they probably could and should score more, especially in the West Ham game. It was so back and forth, and so it literally could have been anyone's game, the West Ham game. And the fact that it takes a penalty to get the goal and get the 3 points is potentially a bit concerning, because those teams in and around the middle where you are, you really should be getting more goals, because you're not going to really score highly against a top 4 team unless something goes really wrong for the top 4 team, which obviously could happen. But yeah, I think potentially still need more goals, but it's been a good start and clearly a very solid defence, which always helps because there's not a lot of games to play in the WSL, so you want to have as many clean sheets as possible, especially if you're not going to score tons and tons.
No, very much so. I'd just like to point out again, 'cause you keep talking about this testing and who's had the easiest chance. I just want to point out that when you played London City Lionesses, you were top of the league, and they were not. And when we had to play Leicester, you're right, they weren't 7th, they were 6th. So there you go. That's the beauty of alphabetical order, which is how things start at the beginning of the season. So to you on that one. There we are. What can I say? Listen, you can't argue the alphabet. It is what it is. Freya, just very quickly for you as well on that one. City, obviously, with a win over Brighton and Hove Albion, 2-1, which is quite a tight result. Do you think that is more a sign of City struggling to get to the level they want to be at, or have Brighton just stepped it up now that they've had that top half finish and they've really done as well as they have done last season? Do you think this is a case of them just being a much harder nut to crack?
I think Brighton have always been a good team. Like, they've always been a really tough team to come up against. So I think, especially after, that 0-0 with Villa on opening day, I think that's kind of lit more of a fire underneath them, and they did some good business during the summer. And I think, welcome back, Sean, talking about Brighton. So yeah, I think they were going to be difficult anyway to beat. And I just think City have had a bit of a wobbly start. They weren't their best against Chelsea, and they weren't their best against Brighton either. And I think it's that difference between that first and second half and how their impact subs can really, really make a difference. I mean, I had to refresh my memory. So long ago. But yeah, I mean, if you can bring on you can bring on Carolyn, you can bring on Fujino, you can bolster the squad from what it's lacking in that first half against Brighton. You can change the shape a little bit. You can really go for it. So yeah, I think City just unfortunately need a bit more time to kind of figure out who they are and what they look like, especially with a new manager and what's he bringing into this, because they haven't looked threatening, which from a City perspective is very worrying, because you expect them to be up there, but if it's loss against Chelsea and tight against Brighton, what's the future going to hold if they don't step up a gear? So hopefully it's just teething problems, but it's worrying for City.
I mean, you say hopefully. The United fan of me is not necessarily concurring with you on that one, but yes, for the sake of neutrality, of course we wish that. Liberty, the final question really for the WSL comes over to you, and Freya, of course, you're welcome to jump in on this as well afterwards if you'd like to. But I was genuinely shocked that Leicester beat Liverpool. I mean, I really did think that had 0-0 pretty much written all over it, but it wasn't just Leicester beating Liverpool. It was Leicester going down to 10 men, which, by the way, that was quite something. I only saw one yellow card get given in the highlights, and then where the second one came from, I don't know. She seems to just pull it out of her back pocket. Go on, Liberty, what happened? Why was there a second yellow?
She gets the yellow card, and then she argues with the ref about the yellow cards. Then she gets a second yellow for talking back to the ref. Which is a very silly second yellow to get. I personally think that if you've got a yellow, don't argue with it, because the amount of times they'll turn around and go second yellow, you're off, is too much to...
She definitely had more time than Diogo Dallo had that time, where he got a yellow card and then literally just a yellow card immediately after because he looked at him the wrong way. So that was a little bit tricky. But yeah, so go down to 10. And then, of course, they go on and score a goal and then hold Liverpool off entirely. We did say in our preview that we thought Leicester and Liverpool were the two teams to worry about. Having seen these two games now, does that sort of stick for you, or are you now more inclined to pick a side?
No, I think it's a sort of, I'm not going to say a moment of magic, because it wasn't magic. It was just a very good header from Emily van Egmond for the goal. But it was the type of moment that's going to come few and far between for a side like Leicester. But when it comes, you've got to take it. And I think in that moment, that is what she did. Obviously, as ever, a very, very experienced player across the world. And so for her to have that moment was probably expected, because she has so much experience. She's played so much football, that you kind of go, yeah, makes sense that she'd be the person on the end of that. And she's also quite tall, which always helps for a header. But I think other than that, the game was really boring. I refused to pay for the Sky Plus thing where you can watch all the games at once. So I sort of end up flipping between all of them whenever something happens. So like United went 2-0 up and I was like, right, change over to Chelsea, and then Chelsea scored and I was like, right, change over to Leicester. And the bits of Leicester Liverpool that I was watching was so boring. And I expected not a lot. So then I had one game up on the TV and put Leicester Liverpool on my lap. And it was so boring. It was like genuinely like really dull. And I think that is concerning because, well, I think it's concerning because you're always going to have very even games in a league when you're playing teams that are a similar level to you. It's going to be even, but if there's no like moment of something to happen that you go, oh, that could be a goal, then I sort of am like, okay. It was very just back and forth between the two. Liverpool technically looked like they were on top at points, especially in the first half. But they'd get the ball, they'd sort of work it around, work it forward, and then nothing would come from it. And then it would go back to the back line. I think I watched Gemma Clark get more touches on the ball than anyone else, which, if you're building up from the back, isn't a bad thing at all. But if the only player I can mention of any worth of having touches on the ball is your centre back, I'm a bit concerned. There's a chance where Mia Enderby sort of should do better and she does it, and you go, oh, that could have been it, and it just isn't. And you know, props to Leicester for taking the chance and sort of building on what I think the foundations of last year were for Leicester. I think a lot of that's carried through. And so for them to be in a position where they get 3 points from it is really good, because an interim manager isn't going to come in and change the script completely. That's not his role. So for them to get 3 points is really good, but it's not. It's going to be harder than that. And I'm concerned for both teams. I'm especially concerned for Liverpool purely because the Everton game was so disastrous. And then this wasn't disastrous in the same level, but it was still like, I'm not seeing like a single flicker of light from anyone. And I think they need somebody to have a flicker of light. And I'm not sure they have that player anymore, unfortunately. And I do think that they have very talented players, but it's going to get to a point where come January, other teams are just going to pick them out and sign them because they know that they can be better elsewhere. And I don't think Taylor is the right manager for Liverpool. I think he was signed purely on the fact that he had experience and pedigree in the league more than anything, which I think says a lot, because I'm concerned about Liverpool Football Club's commitment to the women's team, and I have been for ever. And I think that, yeah, it concerns me that they just sort of just pick the easy option for a manager instead of the right one. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward with him and the squad he's got, because they made some really decent, especially loan signings on the final day of the window, but nobody's really played yet. And I'm like, when are we going to get to the point where they've been deemed to have enough training with this squad that then they can play? Because, you know, there's some players in there that signed on loans that I really like, and I think, you know what, this could be really good. But yeah, I'm yet to see anything more than a candle light, and I really want like full disco lights. That's my analogy.
Yeah, you can get disco lights if you want. They're quite cheap on Amazon, I think. Freya, was there anything you wanted to add on that before we move on to WSL 2?
Yeah, I just think out of the two of them, you'd expect Liverpool to find a way through and to come out on top because of the players they've got. So, yeah, I agree. I don't think Taylor was the right choice at all. Even, you know, keeping Amber Whiteley on, like, I know she's still there on the staff, but they seem to have a lot more joy when she was leading them. So I don't know if they feel a bit disjointed, a bit uncertain, a bit unsure of, you know, who they are now as a team, which is really sad to see. Because, you know, they dominated the first half against Leicester, they dominated against Everton in the first half, and then you just think, well, why isn't something coming from that? So that's, you know, a lot of questions do need to be asked. And yes, commitment to the women's team definitely needs to be shouted more about, because, you know, United get so much heat in the press, don't they? But yeah, there's so many other teams that need, you know, kick up the arse as well. And yeah, in terms of Leicester, I just think, considering how bad things are behind the scenes, as we've seen, losing their manager, you know, a couple of days before, wasn't going to be helpful to anyone. So the fact that they have got 3 points is massive for them. But again, it was unconvincing, and it was just a moment. They only had 2 shots on target. No, they didn't. They had 2 shots, 1 on target, and that was the goal, and that was it during that match. So yeah, just really concerning.
Quite something. Go on then, Liberty. You've forgotten something. It's a good job that Dana wants to listen to you all night.
I'm really sorry. I was going to say something about City. I'm concerned about how they still can't seem to find out where Viv Miedemar needs to play for City. In the Chelsea game, she played in the 10 behind Bunny Shaw, who was an out-and-out striker. In this game, they go for a 3-5-2 rogue formation in terms of football. But she's playing as a second and 2 up top with Bunny Shaw, and I still wasn't very convinced. And you know that the midfield 5 that they had is really good, and I'm just not convinced of how she's going to fit into this City side, which I think is a shame, because she's Viv Miedemar. She's such an incredible player, and she has such experience and wealth in this league, and I think that it's a shame if they can't make her fit. But I still am not sure where she does fit. And if you can't play her as the 10 in one formation, but then she doesn't really work as a 9 with 2 9s in another, I'm lost on where to go from here, because those seems like the 2 sensible formations, and neither of them have really worked. And I think that's also part of City's issue this season, and potentially part of last season. It doesn't seem like these players that they've signed have a fitting spot where, depending on who's available, because also they have often found themselves so riddled with injuries, unfortunately. But I'm still curious of where that goes, what that looks like going forward, because it's just it baffles me that 2 managers basically haven't found out what best to do with Viv Miedemar at City, despite having so much, like 7 years to go back on of her time at Arsenal, where she was the best striker in the league, if not the world. for many parts of it. And so, yeah, I'm baffled, and I don't have, it's not my job to have an answer, but I don't have an answer. And I'm just concerned that it's going to be a lot of the same going forward this season for her and City as a whole, of trying to put the pieces together when you really already need to have the pieces put together before now. That's sort of what pre-season's for. And the fact that all of theirs were behind closed doors and we don't really know what that looked like isn't a bad thing. I think pre-season should be behind closed doors personally, because I think it creates more chaos than is necessary on a sort of fan level. But yeah, I'm just, I don't know, and I'm a bit concerned that that's going to weigh on City more than is really needed when they sort of just need to, hit the ground running.
Yeah, no, I think that seems quite reasonable. Tony wants to talk about Liv Smith turning up wearing a Liverpool shirt to support her girlfriend. I'll be honest, that doesn't bother me in the slightest. What she does in her own time, completely up to her. Probably more of a problem if she was playing for Everton, but she's not. But yes, Cara Cooney-Cross can get in the bin with a half and half scarf, because that is just not acceptable in any walk of life. I'm afraid you can't be doing that. That's no good, no bueno. Right, let's talk a little bit about WSL 2, because it obviously kicked off at the same time as the Women's Super League did last weekend before last now. I just kind of wanted to get just a sort of 5-10 minutes all in all, but just really whether or not you felt the league has begun in the manner that you would expect it to again. Charlton, top of the table. Liberty and I were talking about this backstage a little bit earlier on, but very interesting to see they're the only side with the 100% record still in place after a very good win against Durham there, 2-1. But then sort of the next four all kind of drew against each other, which really did sort of drop the points and give Charlton that ability to get up there. Obviously, Southampton, Birmingham, Sunderland and Newcastle, with Sunderland drawing against Birmingham, Newcastle drawing against Sheffield United, I beg your pardon. So that was quite an interesting one for them. So lots going on there. Ipswich Town, they've obviously just come up from the Southern Premier, and they're definitely realising what a step up that is from the Southern Premier to the WSL 2, because as yet to win a game and struggling a little bit there. So yeah, really just throwing that one out to both of you. We'll kick off with you, Freya, I suppose. What's your thinking on the WSL 2? Obviously, it's very, very, very early days. It's not like we can sit here and claim this is definitely going to be the winners, but it's looking like it's going to be quite a competitive league.
Yeah, for anyone who watches us on a Wednesday, we call it the best league in the world, because it really is. Because literally anything can happen. Anyone can win against anyone else. And as we saw at the weekend, I mean, Sunderland getting a point against Birmingham City was insane. So that's massive points drop for Birmingham, but a massive point game for Sunderland as well. And that was at the Stadium of Light. So the fact that more teams are getting into their main club stadiums is fantastic. I was at the Forest game last week against Newcastle. Forest don't look out of place in this league at all, which is incredible. So the fact that they have gone to Ipswich and got the points kind of shows where they are. I know it was only 1-0, but even so, it's against kind of a similar level competition, if that, and they've kind of already put their mark on the league. But yeah, I think it's going to be so tight. I mean, we saw how tight it was last season. But yeah, people mentioned in the chat, the Palace Southampton complete ding-dong of a game that it was. 4-4 that ended up as. And you just think, there are so many incredible players in the championship that, you know, need to be shouted more about, because like the finishing, that just the everything. So yeah, if people aren't watching it, please do. But yeah, I think the one that kind of surprised us most of all at the weekend was the Newcastle Sheffield, the 1-1, because Newcastle, they're in a, as someone from the northeast, obviously they're the wrong side of the river for starters, but they've put so much money into this team to try and get promotion and to try and, do something to, well for the club to get promoted. They're still not quite clicking. And they're a good team that can put in a good performance. But they're still dropping points against people. Sorry, Sheffield, but who one shouldn't really be in the league anyway because they were relegated. But yeah, they're the games they should be winning, and they're not. So yeah, they need to pull the finger out a bit if they want to still compete against the top teams. But yeah, I love it. I absolutely love this league because it's literally roll the dice. Anything can happen every weekend.
And it really does. Like the last couple of seasons, we've spoken about it quite a bit. As I hear my voice coming back at me there, I'm like, that's weird. Don't like that. But yeah, it's absolutely the case that the last couple of seasons it has been absolutely crazy in terms of how competitive and how difficult a league it has been to win. Liberty, for you, very much the same sort of question. I know that you said, as I said backstage, that you always want to see Charlton do well, but they always seem to end up as always the bridesmaids, never the brides, effectively on that one. What do you reckon? Are you thinking it's going to be a good season again here in the WSL too? Because to be fair, it looks already, like I say, like it is shaping up to be an absolute banger of a season.
Yeah, I always say I'd like Charlton to do well purely because I'm a really big Sophie Whitehouse fan. Before she was at Charlton, she was at Lewis, who are a team that have a quite special place in my heart. I think, what Lewis stand for and what they do in the world of football is really important. So I always like to see their players do well. And so I think she's a player that should be in the WSL. Personally, I think she's at that level to be in a mid-table WSL team. So I want Charlton to do well purely for that. I'm biased. But they get so close every season and they, at some points go like a decent amount of points clear at the top and then sort of crumbles all away right at the end. And then they either end up finishing second or third and you're like, oh, for goodness sake. Which goes into my next point, which is how promotion is going to work this season with the playoff place is going to make this it's already a very interesting and exciting league because anyone can take points from anyone, but then you give them basically more chance for promotion and you go, who wants it the most as such? It's not just the top team goes through now when it's one and done. There is more to fight for essentially, which means, Tottenham can finish second or third again and still have a chance. It's even more exciting in ways that we've seen the championship in men's football be over the years and have that you don't just have to finish top to be promoted. That being said, I think, it's for them to go 2 for 2 is really impressive. And we then see teams who I think I've seen a lot of people say, oh yeah, Palace will just immediately go back up because they've got the caliber and stuff like that. And they will just go back up. It's as easy as that. And I think one, it's quite lazy way to think about a league of football, personally. And two, then you see them have a crazy 4-4 draw. And I mean, the second Abby Larkin goal is really brilliant. And I understand she's, an Irish international. She's a very good player. But I think sort of going off of what you've both said, you forget that this league genuinely has such incredible talent, especially teams that were in the WSL and have been in the WSL in the last 2 years in Bristol and in Palace, that you forget that then they still have those players. Like genuinely the core of those teams are still there, even though they've been relegated. Especially when you think about someone like Annabelle Blanchard saying goodbye to Palace and then coming back, and it's like, don't really understand what happened there, but I really like her. So I'm quite happy for Palace to hold on to her. And I think it gets to a point where you have those teams that have tasted the WSL and then come back down, and then you have teams that are pushing for more. Newcastle, Nottingham Forest have also put a really good amount of money into the women's team. Obviously, were promoted last season to the WSL 2. They have players like another Alex Lewis player I really like, Cara Hamilton, who, if she decided to not shoot directly at the keeper, would have had a really good worldie goal at the weekend, but she shot directly at the keeper, and I was like, don't do that. But you know, she's also a Northern Ireland international, so another international player in and around this league, and I think when you have that juxtaposition of teams that have tasted the WSL and come back down, teams that are pushing to touch the WSL with the investment they're putting in, the money that they're putting aside, it is interesting. I do, and I have concerns that essentially my concerns are brilliant that Newcastle and Forest are putting in money to get there, but what do you do when you get there? Because I get concerned that it not necessarily will stop, but there will be less ferocity in it. That, well, we've got to the end goal. We wanted to be in the WSL. We're here now. We could sort of take the foot off the gas a little bit, and I'm worried that they will do that, especially when you have sort of on the men's side and both Nottingham Forest and Newcastle not necessarily doing as well as we would have expected them to do this season. I'm worried that suddenly there'll be a switch at the top of their sort of the overall club wise, and essentially the gas will be taken off the women a little bit. And I'm worried that what that says about their integrity in women's football, because I think it's potentially what we've seen with Liverpool, where Liverpool went down to the Championship, then they get re-promoted and the foot has essentially been taken off the gas, and they make potentially poor decisions in depending on how you see it, you know, firing Matt Beard, not having proper investment, the bringing in Gareth Taylor is potentially not the best choice of manager after getting rid of Beard. And I'm worried that that's going to be a similar thing for Forest and for Newcastle, because, well, the end goal was WSL and we're here. So as long as we're sort of coasting by, it's not really an issue. Whereas the difference between them and London City is they have always said, we want to be top four, we want to play Champions League, which obviously in itself presents its own issues because of Lyon and things. But yeah, I am just worried about that a little bit. But however, that is a much more of a future issue, because at the moment neither Forest or Newcastle are necessarily going to be promoted this season. That's a big jump in my thinking, but I just think I wanted to say it. But yeah, other than that, a league of very good goals. I always watch the WSL 2 and watch highlights and things, and I'm like, yeah, they've got some absolute corkers in this team, in these teams, which I think always helps the excitement levels. I think if you've got a player that is cracking things out that are so good that people then go, oh, I'm going to watch that because she might do it again and stuff like that, which never hurts.
Yeah, I think she's watching the Chelsea fans at the moment, just having a little, I don't know what the word is, conflagration. Is that a good enough word? We use that in the chat at the moment over Kira Walsh, which is quite an interesting thing to do. And you know that it's happened because in Chelsea there, somebody's just used the word bruv. So it's gone very London, very quick over there. So love that. Freya, I just want to give you the last word on the WSL too. Which was, as I said, we see Ipswich come up, no points as yet. We've seen Forest come up, and they have managed to get 3 points so far. Obviously, with the WSL increasing the number of teams that are going to be in there to 14, there's going to be more teams that need to come up from the Southern Premier and the Northern Premier in order to fill up the WSL too. Do you worry when you look at this sort of spread? You said that Forest have done incredibly well. Ipswich at the moment not necessarily doing as well as they would like. Do you worry that those teams that we see come up may not necessarily be of the caliber needed for the WSL 2?
To the WSL 2?
Yes.
Yeah, it's still very much like if you look at the Northern Premier, you've got your Wolves and your Burnley, and you've got a couple of teams there that are pushing for promotion anyway because they're that good. They probably should be in the WSL too. But it might then be the case that you get, again, depending on spaces, depending on what happens, that you get one club that's ready for the jump and one club that's not quite ready, and then they have to have a season where it's just awful all around. It just doesn't quite fit yet. So I think whatever they need to do, they need to plan that the clubs are able to have that infrastructure and they've got that support and they've got the ability to at least have a good goal in that league and they don't feel like a complete fish out of water. So we need to make sure it's done properly. Expansion of the leagues is fantastic, but we need to make sure that everyone has the right support, because there's nothing worse than just knowing from the off, that team unfortunately are going to go straight back down, because that does nothing for morale and for the club itself. So yeah, if they do it right. But yeah, I worry slightly.
Fair enough. Well, we are nearly at the end of the show, but of course we've got to talk about the Champions League and potentially throw a little bit of the Europa Cup in there, just so that Liberty can finish where she started the entire show. But who knows where that might be. But just looking first of all at the Champions League, it's half time at the moment. The games are obviously being played on the 18th of September, which, as everybody will know, is a Thursday. So that is quite a big one. Now, remember, in terms of the league path and the Champions path, there is a little bit of a sort of change in terms of the teams. I'll run you through the halftime scores just in case you haven't seen them. I will do the very best that I can, but the reason why I turned it off, my eyes are getting very blurry at the moment. I don't know if I've been looking at the screen for so long or whatever, but it could go a bit wrong, so I might just read out words entirely incorrectly. So forgive me for that. But Valerenga are currently doing incredibly well against Ferencvaros. They're 3-0 up. Leuven were 2-0 up after their game against Vorskla Poltava. St. Paulton are 3-1 up against Fortuna Huring. And Katowice, who we spoke about the last time we spoke about Europe, a couple of weeks ago, are currently getting bopped, to be fair, by Twente 4-0. So that's the Champions path. In the league path, Häcken are level with Atletico Madrid, 1-1. Paris FC are 0-0 with Austria Vienna. Brann are, of course, 1-0 up against Manchester United. Eintracht Frankfurt are 2-1 down to Real Madrid, and Roma are 2-1 down to Sporting CP. So that's where the Champions League sits at the moment. Looking at the Champions path, you would say a lot of teams there looking like they might well be through already. But that league path, it's really tight in every single game. It's one of those, if we're going to have a multi-view Liberty, that's kind of where you'd want it to be, wouldn't you? Because there's going to be changes going galore, I think, potentially going in there, and it could really be an absolute delightful Thursday evening.
Yeah, I think it's sort of a similar thing that we're talking about when we talked about the different pathways last time, whereas the league path, is going to be more interesting because the games are tighter in terms of the sort of talent either side as such, if you get me. Whereas we sort of said that the Champions path were the leagues that are lower and not spoken about as much, but there are, things like Twente, they've just got your award now, and it's like, okay, like that brings your levels up considerably in that sort of category, because you have a very experienced international player, experienced in the Champions League. She's played in Champions League final before. She's played in England for 2 teams, in Germany for 2 teams, and she's gone home. And completely understand why she went home and her reasoning for all that. And more strength to her for taking that decision at that point in her career. But there is a clear difference between her talent levels and the levels of the rest of the champions pathway, even though, you know, there are some players in that pathway who are pushing to be international players. They just aren't there yet, especially because they are really quite young. But in terms of the league pathway, I think it's so interesting. I think Bran probably took a lot of people by surprise. Not in the sense of I don't really think anyone sort of thought, you know, United were going to run away with it and it was going to be sort of 4-0 at all. But the fact that they get the goal and they at home record crowd, which is unbelievable for Norwegian women's football, and I'm so happy that they got that as well as the 3 points, because yeah, I think a lot of people thought that United were going to go back to Lee Sports Village with sort of it game, set, and match as such. However, I think a lot of people have, and I've seen friends of mine and other people saying it feels a bit like Arsenal Häcken last year, where Arsenal go to Gothenburg, they lose 1-0, and then they come back and they to Meadow Park and they essentially run Häcken over, and it's 4-1 on aggregate. I'm not saying that that's what I think is going to happen, but I understand where people are coming from with that sort of point of view.
Does it annoy you that this isn't going to be on, like we were speaking about the fact that Disney Plus are going to have the European rights, the fact that Sky have got it? Does it annoy you that this isn't televised? Because this is quite big for these clubs. And when you look at, again, I don't want to keep going on about the poor old champions, but they're pretty much done as it stands. There's nothing there that's really super exciting. But in these sort of games you've got there in the league path, you would think that even if you got to the third qualifier round, these are the sort of games that people would want to turn in and watch, because you'd argue there's probably more on this game that's coming up this Thursday than the first 2 or 3 in the Champions League proper.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And I understand why some of these teams have these games behind a paywall. So Eintracht Frankfurt had it on Frankfurt TV, but it's behind a paywall. I'm assuming that United will have it behind a paywall on MU TV.
Yeah.
The only team that I saw had a free and accessible stream for the first match day was Paris FC, and I did watch it because it was just on YouTube. It was as simple as that. It was on YouTube, no paywall, no nothing. It was just free for view, so that anyone could watch it if they wanted to. And I thought we should have more teams like this. I know that last year Arsenal had all of their qualifiers just on the Arsenal app for free, and I think, you know what? I think that these sort of games you probably should have for free. I'm really sorry. I don't think they should necessarily be behind a paywall, because I just think you want people to be able to watch them. And if people are going to have to pay for the actual Champions League, why are they paying for a qualifier? Personally, it's just my opinion. But yeah, I think United will look to overturn this result. And I think going off of the confidence from yesterday will help them. But I also think they will also be thinking ahead to the Arsenal game at the weekend. So I think they're in a really tricky spot where they will definitely want to overturn the Bran result and get into the Champions League proper for the first time. But they don't really have enough squad depth to sort of throw everything at this game and know that they'll be fine for the Arsenal game, because they know that Arsenal have had over a week of rest at that point, because we played Friday night and the United game will be on Sunday. Yeah. So they're in very different positions. So I think it'll be interesting how Skinner manages this second Bran game, especially considering the changes he made for the first Bran game, including, Zagotti Olma is benched at the start and stuff. I think Frankfurt obviously lost away in Madrid, but then they go back home. And I think they have a really good record at home. I think they have a really strong fan base now that go to their home games. Yeah. So I think with only being a goal in difference between them, they will look to overturn it as well. However, they lost at the weekend quite badly to Hoffenheim. Selena Cersei scored 2. Once again, just putting out there, what an incredible player she is. I think she'll be on a lot of WSL teams' radars coming into January, and if not next summer, because she's really, really excellent. So they will look to bounce back from that result and also the Real Madrid result. And I don't know what's going to happen there. Häcken, as I said, rearranged their Damallsvenskan game against Malmo at the weekend, so they had more rest for Atletico. Atletico won at the weekend. So I think they will have confidence. They're doing really well in the league, but they struggled against Häcken. To have a 1-1 draw, I don't really think I would have seen coming between the two sides. So I think they will look to turn this result and get into the Champions League proper.
Yeah.
But I really don't think it's going to be that easy. And then Sporting surprising Roma really surprised me as well, especially because Roma were 1-0 up and suddenly it was 2-1 at the end of the game, which I think is really interesting. I think it says a lot about where Portuguese football is, and I think it doesn't get talked about as much as other leagues, and I think it is a really good league, so I know I need to start talking about it more, but it's one of those ones you can't really watch in England, so it really annoys me. Anyway, I think Roma will try and get back and get a result, but I once again don't think it's going to be that easy because Sporting have surprised them already, and Paris, it's just 0-0, and it's just like, well, it's anyone's game at that point. If you're drawing, then it literally is whoever decides to turn up and score.
No, absolutely that. And Freya, bringing you in on this as well. Yeah, again, as Liberty talks there about Roma, they've obviously been playing in the Serie A Cup over the last couple of weeks. So that's given them a little bit of sort of football to help them, I suppose, prepare for these sorts of games. But where do you stand on how exciting this is? It seems to be on a knife edge for sure. And also, again, the fact that it's not really televised anywhere. People have got to go hunting to try and find these things. And actually, it feels like you almost want, like UEFA, I suppose, to have these games on their website, dare I say, a little bit like an FA player, so that they have control over these. Because then, ultimately, if it does start to pop, they're in a situation where they can say, well, we've got the rights to all of these qualifying games, and it can go behind one place rather than having to effectively turn into Annika Rice in a helicopter and go flying around on treasure hunt. That is a very niche joke.
That was a very niche reference.
To get that one.
Well done. How to get Annika Rice in a football podcast? Well, that was very well done. I just think, again, at this pivotal time in women's football, like Liberty says, like a lot of people would watch it because it's on and it's free and it's on YouTube and it's accessible. And the amount of things, the last, I can't even remember what competition it was, the Nations League last season, I was trying to, one of my things was I'll write mini match reports for all the games because it's not accessible. And I was on like VPNs in, God knows where, going down a rabbit hole on this really grainy match stream for something. And it's like most people aren't that dedicated to try and find a stream of a club that they may not have any affiliation to. And you just want, it's UEFA. They should have the intelligence is the wrong word. The open-mindedness. There we go. To say, look, there's an appetite here. Lots of people are interested. Let's put it all under one roof. These are, the matches coming up. This is the next stage. This is what's happening. And just say, this is what's at stake and it's all here. We are the home of the qualifiers. We are, the home of this competition, which they are. So they should be proud of that. Or have a YouTube channel dedicated to showing these things, or just something. Because the people who are, hardcore United fans have got MUTV, that's fine. But if you're just more of a casual, or you're not really, if your team's never been in Champions League, why would you necessarily be paying for this. So yeah, it just needs to. We're getting more professional now. There's more of an appetite for it. Just give the people what they want, and that's literally it. So yeah, if anyone from UEFA is watching, we want it.
That point that you made about it going on the Arsenal website, I mean, I can distinctly remember going back to watch that, and it made me feel very dirty because obviously you've got to put an email address in and allow them to email you, and it's never nice when that pops up in your inbox. But it was so accessible, so easy, and everybody could watch it. And it seems mad to me that more clubs don't consider that.
It's even worse when the team sell the rights. Well, I don't think I'm going to refrain from saying the team. When the rights to the qualifier are sold outwards to separate broadcasters and they put it behind two separate paywalls, as the Hammarby mini tournament round 2 were by Aftonblatt. It was one paywall is for normal Aftonblatt, which they don't really show many games. The only games I've ever watched on there are the Spencer Cup games. So that, and then, but it wasn't just behind that one paywall, which would have been fine because I could have watched that. No, it was behind a second paywall, which cost the equivalent of, I did the
conversion.
That's the one. Thank you. £2 purely to watch would have been 2 games. It was going to be like an extra 20 quid. And I just thought, wow. I'm sorry, I'm not doing that. So the first qualifier game, I did not watch, the really crazy one. And then I watched the United one, but not through the sort of Hammarby lens that I probably should have, because two paywalls for 2 games is ridiculous. And I understand because Aftonblatt are a very big corporation over in Sweden. I always compare them to people that I don't know if this is necessarily the same, but to me they give a very much Sky Sports sort of feeling, really big. But 2 separate paywalls for 2 qualifiers is really bad in my eyes. And I sort of half expected them to be sort of just on the Hammarby website, or at least on the Hammarby website, but you pay a little bit. But to be outsourced and then behind 2 paywalls was really, really bad in my eyes and left a bad taste in the mouth. Whoever's idea that was, I wasn't a fan at all. I just think qualifiers, especially of that nature, shouldn't be so hard to access. I think they should be easier to access. And I'm not saying they should be completely free, even though that would be preferable. But so, like, it would have been £30 to watch 2 games. It's just ridiculous in my eyes. I'm really sorry.
It's probably cheaper to go to it live.
The season ticket at some clubs,
exactly. Did you have anything more to add on the games, Freya? Because you spoke a bit about the.
I just think I was having a little look at the first leg results again. And I just think it is so open. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 games, like you mentioned, that are, it's going to be hard to come back from a 4-0 first leg, but the rest of them are so close. It's going to be really, really it's going to be exciting. It's going to, I'm excited to see what United can do at home with a home crowd and, hopefully their boots. So hopefully it all goes well for them. I just think, again, anything can happen. And I hope, for the neutral in me that there may be some upsets that could be quite nice. New faces, don't you, in these competitions and getting a better chance. So.
You absolutely do, and I think having a strong Champions League lineup would be a very good thing. I'm on record in the last show that I did, saying, you know what, I actually think the Arsenal game is bigger than the Brand game for Manchester United, because whatever happens, United are in Europe. Whether they go into the Europa Cup or whether they make it into the Champions League, and I think United aren't going to win the Champions League. If that happens. Something's something's been put in their lasagna. I'm telling you, because would be unexpected, to say the least. But I think they've got a much better shot of winning the Europa Cup. So I'd not be too mad if United dropped into that. But of course, it's good for England. Of course, we get 3 teams into the Champions League proper. So lots there to look at. We'll just very briefly run through where the Europa Cup is, because obviously they are in the first round of qualifying now, with an abundance of teams from the Champions League qualifiers, the third place teams mostly there. So some pretty big ones, certainly in terms of the domestic one. Glasgow City are 3-0 up against Athlone Town, which is massive for Glasgow City. That gives them a good chance to perform. Grasshopper are 2-0 up against BIIK Shymkent. I still don't know how to say that properly. I'll get there. Cougar, I think that is, are 3-2 up against Farul Constanta from Romania. I hate this one. I'll never get it right. North Zealand are up against Cups. They're 3-1. Ajax 2-0 up against Graz. Limassol are losing 5-0 to Anderlecht, and I think that's probably goodbye to the Cypriot team. Vlasnia are 2-0 up against Kolos Kovalivka, which I'll be honest sounds like a boxer. Rosenborg are 3-0 up against PSV. SFK 2000, which does sound like some sort of Hoover, are 0-0 against Fomget. Inter Milan 4-1 up against Hibernian, the Scottish champions, not doing as well as they'd like to. And Partizani are 5-0 down to Spartak Subotica. So there we go. Some great names. Freya, I'll just throw that one back over to you real quick there. Especially when you look at some of the domestic ones, Glasgow City, they probably look like, out of the 2 Scottish sides, the ones that are likely to make it through to the next round. But anything standing out there for you?
Oh, there's just so many. Yeah, I'm just having a look through. I mean, I'm glad Inter have found some good form towards the end of last season and this. They're through to the Serie A Women's League Cup, the first ever edition. They're through to the quarters there as well. So yeah, I'm really pleased for them that they're doing well. But yeah, I mean, for a club like Glasgow City, for them to be doing well in Europe, there's finally a competition where they can do that. Makes me a little bit happy. So yeah, pleased for both of those. Really, I think they're the two that really stood out. But yeah, huge.
Okay. Well, there we go. I've got no idea why Liberty disappeared there, but disappeared she did. Were you finished there, Freya, or did you have more to add?
Probably. Yeah, fine.
Probably.
I have no idea anymore.
So Liberty, I've got no clue what happened there either. You were there, and then you just dropped out. You posted this just a little bit earlier. I talk way too much for every single question. Sorry, guys, and I don't necessarily agree with that. It's not that you talk too much, but you do remind me of like one of those energetic dogs. You know, the ones who can never just stop on one thing. It's just like you go for it. Like the ball's been chased. It's like, oh no, a squirrel. Actually, let's go over here. And you've got so much knowledge of what you're talking about that you just go meandering off on one of these lovely little tourist walks. And like I say, that's why people can listen to you quite well. But it is 10:05 and I am rapidly losing the sight in my eyes. I can't read the comments. Europa Cup. We've seen where we are. I've gone through some of the scores there. I'll let you finish us off for the evening. Talk to us about the Europa Cup. Any sort of big score lines there that have surprised you, or anything really interesting worth talking about?
I apologize first off. I don't know what happened. I tried to scroll on the comments and then suddenly Google closed down, and then I came back and then I was like, I was panicking. I thought I'd done something. Also, apologies because I was gone and then I came back. I apologize if anything I am about to say Freya already said and I didn't hear it. I'm not doing it on purpose, but
you'll probably say it better than me, Liberty. Don't worry.
Don't be silly. Absolutely not. But yeah, it went and then it came back, and I missed all of what she said. I think it's interesting that Ajax are 2-0 up. They obviously played at home, that first leg, but they are one of these Europa teams that potentially should have been in the first round qualifiers for the Champions League, but weren't because of where they finished in the domestic league last season. Obviously, a team that have Champions League proper experience a couple seasons back. So interesting that they are only 2-0 up. Not, I don't say only in a sort of dissy negative way, but just purely because the experience and the players they have, you almost think they should be. But they did change managers over the summer, so it could be more of a issue of not an issue, a situation with that more than anything else. They're also one of those teams that get raided quite often by bigger teams elsewhere in the world because they do have quite talented players, and they're probably quite lucky to hold on to some players they have, especially the number one goalkeeper, Regina van Eyck, probably is quite lucky that she still plays for them, because I would have thought she would have gone out of the Netherlands by now, especially because she's pushing up into the national team, sort of on and off. Inter, I think, are really interesting. They've put a lot of money into the women's team. Apologies if Freya's already said this. They've put a lot of money in, so I think it's interesting that they are taking this opportunity and sort of running with it. And I feel for Athlone. They sort of got caught on the break a lot, and I feel bad that it's 3-0, and I don't think they're necessarily going to come back from it. But it would have been nice if a League of Ireland team could have got far in the Europa League, and unfortunately, I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case, especially for them. What else?
I mean, getting Glasgow City was always going to be a difficult one for them there. I mean, they are quite a good side, really.
Yeah, I think it was always going to be difficult, and I think they would have wanted more out of the first leg at least, than they got. So I think that is. I also think that the thing of the Europa League is nobody really knows where anyone's going into it on a standpoint from, because everything's brand new. Nobody knows what this is going to look like. Nobody can actually watch it at the moment because it's got no broadcaster, as Uncle Montana Tony said. But the Ajax first leg was also on YouTube for free. So I don't know if the away leg will be, because it's not they're not playing at home, so it might not be the same because they technically won't have the rights. But if it is, the first leg was on YouTube, so potentially you might be able to watch that. I think that's all I have to say. Once again, I've talked too much. I'm sorry.
That's all right. So yeah, I mean, hopefully they will find somewhere to put it, and I'm sure that once we get past the first and second qualifying rounds of the Europa Cup, and we hit, I think it's the round of 16, I think they said it is. Once we get to that, I hope that we will be having that much more on our screens so that people are able to watch it. But I think it's going to be quite an interesting competition. We've had quite an interesting conversation, and it's been going incredibly well. Liberty, you are able to unmute your mic one last time as you tell everybody whereabouts they could possibly find you, providing you don't just, Google kick you out of places.
Everything is just my name. It's Liberty Simons, like the boy's name with an S on the end. Tick, say that every time. And I talk a lot about lots of different things. I talk all across Europe, all across England, and final Hammerby mention of the day, they have big Stockholm derby against their direct rival Djurgården on this weekend. Next Monday? Yeah, in a week's time. So I'll be talking about that because that's going to be a really interesting game, because we're top of the table, as I said. They're fourth. They've had a season that I don't think necessarily many people would have expected them to have. But tonight, they lost against Norrköping, who are fifth. Who have
Against
been...
who?
Norrköping.
Nor
It's-
shipping. That
Nor
sounds like
shipping.
someone
That sounds like a Geordie.
Newcastle or Sunderland. So we
It's
nor
a-
shipping good air, lad.
It's a city. It's a city. But it's has a special character letter to make it nor shipping. It's like link shipping. I'm really sorry for my really bad English pronunciation. I'm trying really hard, but I'm still not very good. I'm really sorry.
It's spelt like that.
Yeah, like that.
Wow.
It's just so, and then it's like it's the same way that link shipping is because it's LINK shipping. It's Sweden is a funny language. This is but anyway. With that, they actually lost to Norrköping tonight, 2-0. Norrköping have been the sort of top fours bogey team this season. Everyone's dropped points to Norrköping, but obviously we did beat them in the Svenska Cupen final. So, and once again, I'd like to really apologise for my English pronunciations. I'm trying, but I'm still not very good. But I'm trying. But yeah, I'll probably be talking about that next week. And also Arsenal United the weekend.
Liberty, I've just read about 40 foreign sounding names, and I'm pretty sure I butchered about 38 of them. So I don't think anybody's really coming at you for your pronunciation. I'm sure BIIK Shimkent are wondering what on earth is happening over here. And just to point out, Daniel has put out on here, yes, she does flit, but it is nice to hear her knowledge and enthusiasm about the game, and I couldn't agree more. Freya, you've had loads going on. Let the people know where they can see you again. Are you back on Wednesday with your Absolute podcast? And how's the whole 115 yards going?
I just don't know where to stop, do I really? But yeah, on a Wednesday we've got the Absolute Women's Football Show where we cover WSL, WSL 2, everything in Europe that's interesting. We'll give it a little shout out. So yeah, we're live at 8:30 then. I'm doing the whole 115 yards, which again is a mix of everything. I've had the transfer tracker going on over the summer, and I'm back to do my weekly roundups, which are really fun, and some interviews and stuff on there as well. But yeah, more of my writing and stuff is either the whole 115 yards or at T for AT Writes across all of the socials. Thank you.
There we go. You're very welcome. No need to thank you too for giving up your Monday evening to come on here and talk to us. As Sean says here, been great company tonight. It always is. I love chatting football with these two. It's absolutely brilliant, and they make my brain smarter, and that is really what we're after. So thank you again in the chat as well. Lots going on there. You've kept me thoroughly entertained with the argument over Kira Walsh. Maybe that's a show. Maybe we could go into that one. Is Kira Walsh doing well at Chelsea? Is 8 months enough time to judge how she's been doing? I don't know. But it was a very good discussion going on in there, and pretty respectfully done too as well. So well done to you guys. Thank you very much for joining us. We should, fingers crossed, be back next Monday when we will be talking all about the Champions League proper, because we will know at that point who it is who is going to be contesting the Champions League. And we'll also know whether or not Liberty is going to pay for Disney Plus to be able to watch it. Want to find that out? Come see us next week. Night all.